Hi, everybody. So we have Anthony Cruz. You work in a world where probably predominantly often the only kind of organic instrument in a song can be the vocal. Do you have a favorite mic that you always use, or a plethora, a collection of mics?
When I started with Meek, he would always talk about the Sony. This was like 2013. As you can imagine, it's been hard to find. I know it's popped up recently. I got him on the Manly reference just to test it out, and he ended up being married to it. I actually love it on his voice because it has like this grittiness on the top end.
Now, as far as mic pre's, do you have a preference on a mic pre?
We use the BAE 1073, but it's interesting. We use the DMP model.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I have one of those too. Yeah.
Yeah. So we use the DMP, which obviously was made, more for like bass, live instrument, but it has a tone that we love. It's really easy to travel with. Gets the job done. You don't have to rack it up.
Now, what about compression? Are you going through compression after the mic pre?
Yes. The only thing analog in our setup is his vocal chains. 1073 DMP into the TubeTech CO1B.
It's like the industry standard, isn't it? I've heard Jason talk about it when we did the interview with him. He said that when he was assisting at Larrabee, that every mixer, doesn't matter if it was like Dave Way doing a more rock or pop project, or Manny, or whoever came in, everybody used the CL1B.
I mean, listen, it's tried and true. It sounds absolutely amazing. And unless you're doing a ballad, maybe you do LA2A, but I mean, for hip hop, it just has so much control and warmth.
I think what I love about it, I'm sure it's the same for you, is when it does go into like a huge amount of compression, it doesn't choke. It doesn't go.
Exactly. And we hit it pretty hard sometimes. I mean, because my guy is like a rock star vocally. I always joke that he's like, Steven Tyler of hip hop. Like, he can get up there. And so
Right.
You need something like a TubeTech that can take a beating and still maintain that quality.
Tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you end up here?
In my college years, just really started diving into curiosity around production and how people make records sound radio ready. It moved me to just, kind of just drop everything I had going on. I took the journey to New York, grinded it out, worked a couple jobs, and ended up at Rock the Mic Studios under Rock Nation, Jay-Z and the team.
How did you get there?
The girlfriend I was with at the time had an internship at Sony. Rock Nation happened to be around the corner at the time in the Sony building on Madison. She kind of put the word in like, hey, my boyfriend's looking for an internship, and they happened to have availability at the studio, and we hit it off from the jump. My first sessions that I was assisting was a Neo session, a Mary J. Blige session. Stargate was in-house. So it was, you talk about getting thrown into the fire and an amazing opportunity. It was unlike any other experience, that you could have at a studio. The great thing about working with these guys was they were non-traditional. And any studio, like the environment that you come in traditionally in LA and, the Paramounts and things like that, you might not touch the board for like a year or more, so these guys they gave me an opportunity early on. I had my first session officially with Neo probably a month or two into my internship, which is unheard of. I mean, a client of that stature, for them to allow the in-house guy that they just hired to handle that session. So of course it was the food runs and all the typical internship responsibility, but they threw me right in the fire. I mean, it made me who I am. All the challenges and things you have to face and how to adjust to this level of professionalism. It's the best way to learn. I recorded with Jesse J. I did some work with Ryan Leslie, all the Rock Nation roster, Bridget Kelly, all those guys, Santi Gold. So it was like a nice mix. I was assisting J. Cole. We had Chris Martin stop by randomly one day. I was able to help them out. When Jay-Z would come by, Guru would kind of let me be a fly on the wall, which is very rare. And he talks about it all the time. It's not something that Jay is usually comfortable with, but they were, very open, so overwhelming and amazing experience, like a dream.
What was your first real session of you recording it and leading the session?
The first one was that Neo session, which was absolutely terrible. I ended up buying everybody lunch, It's like, sorry, my speed wasn't up to par, vocal, background vocals. He's very particular about his backgrounds, and I wasn't blending them properly. And he was like, you could tell he was frustrated, but he's a very stand-up guy and understanding. And it was rough, but I got through it. I mean, you have to do those, you know what I mean? You got to get through that. But that was the first one that I was like fully in control of that room.
So after that terrifying first session, where you felt like you were falling flat on your face, what was the next step from there?
The next step from there was obviously to take everything and really learn from it and start to hone in. One of the things that was taboo at the time was recording templates. When y'all would ask peers, as an upcoming kid, hey, can I check out kind of some of your settings? Back then, it was like, no, you know what I mean? Like it was very taboo. It was very like, these are things that we've built over time, and you can kind of learn yourself. We'll give you some feedback on mixes, but they weren't really as privy as they are now to share the sauce, if you will. I built my own template and tried to make my process more efficient, because that was definitely a big issue, was trying to do things on the spot the way that I had learned it in school. And once you get in the chair and in the industry, you realize certain things that aren't really talked about a lot. And so that was one of them, was having a template ready to go that I could load up and I could adjust and do some fine tuning, but not have to necessarily start from scratch. So that was the biggest takeaway, I think, from that session. And it's helped me a lot to this day, especially with Meek, because he's very particular about the settings and things like that. So we're never starting from zero.
When you're working with really overly is probably the wrong word, but very dynamic rappers and singers, are you conscious of like on the DMP, for instance, you've got to gain control? Because what I will do sometimes is I'll take like a lyric sheet and I'll go this phrase, and this phrase. They're really going in hard, and I might actually click the gain down. Is that even possible with a fast rap or something like that to control it?
It's interesting that you have the ability to have a lyric sheet because my guy is on the spot. He's mumbling and getting ideas out and then filling it in, and so you don't know the words until he knows the words on the spot. So like punch-ins and things like that, it's very hard to prepare for. So what happens is over time you start learning some of their process, and he might mumble something and he's saying like, bring it back to whatever bar, but you learn that over time with the artist. But it's interesting, like there's not a lot of room for how he's going to necessarily perform it. And so I dial in enough where I know when he's going to hit it hard, I'm under, I have control of the vocal, and a lot of my adjusting is in the box. So on the analog side, I have it set where it's like, okay, I know he's going to hit hard at certain points. So, he likes to hear his vocal louder than normal. And so I know where to kind of get that sweet spot on the analog side. And then in the box is where I'm mostly fine tuning, and doing gain control and things like that.
Let me ask you a little bit about your template then. So if you're tracking in using the DMP, the TubeTech CL1B, the Manley reference mic, what do you have on your template? You have additional compression, etc., EQ, any kind of favored plugins you can let us know?
A lot of the template is based around like FabFilter EQ, a lot of waves. And then afterwards is when we put in some of the heavier like UAD stuff, some Slate stuff, things like that. But going in, the cleanest low latency recording that we get, he's used to these waves plugins, mostly the Renaissance. REQ, use RVox, R compressor, the de-esser, sometimes C4, lightly. I used to go a little harder, and I've learned over time multi-brand compression is a dangerous,
very dangerous thing, isn't it? It tends to, you like it at the time because it softens everything and makes it feel all so pretty, and then you listen back to it and you're like, where's the edge in my vocal gone?
Absolutely. So we're going in on a cut track for low latency, and I'm just dragging down his takes. As he wants to hear back, I'll just drag down, and then I'm playlisting everything, even mumbles, whatever, because he moves so fast and nothing, like I said, is written down. And so he may forget a bar or an idea or a flow or whatever. And so I'm playlisting everything as I go.
And you're in Pro Tools?
Yes.
You're in Pro Tools. What about the comping process? Does he come in and sit with you and go through everything line by line, like immediately after singing?
Yeah, he's really good at keeping the process moving just so that he doesn't lose that edge and that vibe. So we're comping as we go. So he'll tell me like where he wants to cut off, or, he may lay it out as best as possible in a session and then come back the next day and be like, I can get that line better tomorrow, or whatever, if he feels like, he's overdone it for the day. So it's not traditional comping, but there are times when I go back and I hear something that maybe he didn't hear, maybe like a word that he said a little cleaner. I go back in these takes and I'll do some of that stuff on my own time. But 9 times out of 10, he's telling me what takes are his favorites, and we're, piecing it up as we go.
What about if he wants to do a double? Does he ever double his vocal?
So the doubles are basically in and outs. So he'll come in and do like the tail end of the phrases, and then he'll come back around and do an ad lib track. Is his typical flow. If it's an auto tune record, he's been experimental lately. He may want to do more layers to certain parts of the song, but typically on a rap record, he's just in and outs to emphasize, and then he'll do ad libs just to add some ear candy.
What's a typical vocal session like, time wise?
Lately, we've been under 12 hours, but when we're really locked in and trying to get, things done, we can go 12 to 16, and then there's the work that we have to do after with like file management and things like that. So it can get pretty lengthy, but as of late, he's been kind of like knocking things down a lot faster, and sessions might only be 4 to 6 hours or whatever. But when he really is like in a serious album mode, when he's fully locked in, we're going, easily 12 to 16 hours.
Used to call him the Steven Tyler of rap and hip hop. And Steven's the same way. When I recorded him, he will sing and then he'll stop and go, I need to punch in here. I need to redo that. Take that bit, take this bit. And so by the end of it, you might do 2 or 3 hours of singing, but at the end of the 2 or 3 hours of singing, the comp's done.
He's efficient like that. Yeah. He's like, that's the take, or let me get it better. Even if we're like, that sounded amazing, he's like, he's very picky. And he has his ways as an artist of like, I know I can challenge myself to do that better. So let me just cut it again. Worst case, we'll have that take, but it's very efficient. We're moving.
Many times you're giving this to external mixers.
Yeah. So what I like to do, and what I've gotten the freedom to do over time with him, I'm able to work with people that I admire on the mix side that'll inspire me, that, obviously I'm hands-on with that as well, because I just know, especially like you said, with his vocal, there's certain things that he feels that mixers overdo. It helps for me to be able to work with somebody that I know, that I trust, that we work well together, and can avoid certain things. I mean, he listens to his songs so much. He gets demoitis on the 2-track mixes, and it's very tough to kind of get him out of that comfort zone. So I have to work with people that are understanding, will take his notes and be like, all right, it is what it is. Like, we can meet in the middle. We'll find that happy medium. What I started doing from his Wins and Losses album in 2017 on down, I would work with particular people that I've come up with in the industry that I love working with, that we have a great relationship, and I'll bring them in that process so that we have this synergy. And I worked with Miles Walker, who did a lot of the Stargate stuff when I met at Rock the Mic in 2017, and then when we did Championships, I brought Guru in. This last album, I brought in my guy James Royo. And there's things that I know that they're going to do when we're, because there's like a sound that I feel like these guys have based on the body of work. So, Guru is classic Rockefeller, hip hop, good low end, like soulful. That was Championships. Wins and Losses had a lot of like bigger records that Miles did an amazing job with. And then me and James did like the gritty trap record with Expensive Pain. So it's like you bring in people that you love working with that match kind of what the vibe of that album is. And that, I think, is amazing that he allows us to even do that creatively.
I once did a hip hop course with Matt Weiss, and I mixed the track as well. Right. And I learned so much from it because I'm so used to just applying what I want to the track. And the artist was like, yeah, sounds good. but you changed it too much. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, my beat is my beat.
Mm.
Don't change the sounds. Don't, you know, I felt like it needed more low end here or less there. And I realized that that's such an integral part of the production. So a mixer in hip hop has to understand the vision and not just kind of throw it away and take it into a completely different direction. So I hear what you're saying about the, you know, the kind of the idea of demoitis, but I realize there's so much more to hip hop production than, you know, because they spend so much time and energy on choosing the right sounds.
Absolutely. And a lot of these producers they're getting a lot better at mixing their beats. So when you get the 2-track beat, it sounds great, has a great low end, they balance really well. There's still guys out there that are distort their beats and things sound a little crunchy and whatnot, but majority of the people that we work with are very good at maintaining a quality. When you get the 2-track, it feels like a record, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's really hard to, like that guy said, like go in and you're feeling like you're doing too much because it was already kind of there. Especially working with these guys, I've learned a lot and it's added to my process and the efficiency of the mix process. And I've simplified a lot where I used to overthink it and kind of do all these like Rube Goldberg techniques, and it would be running through all these massive buses and things. And I've learned, especially from Guru and James, to dumb it down. So working with these guys actually enhances my capabilities as well. So I've gotten a lot more comfortable doing some of the mixing as well. Because the thing is, I'm so hands on and day to day with his music that mentally, when I get into a mix space on his stuff, I've heard it so much. It's a little challenging creatively to be the mixer as well. What I know of him and what I know he wants to attain sonically, some of the issue is I've worked on this record so much. I would rather bring in a second ear,
Yeah.
you know, to kind of enhance and be like, hey, maybe you didn't hear this, to bring it to, you know, that level. And you know, like the guys that I work with, they never cease to amaze me. When we get to that process, I'm like, whoa, like, you know, the low end here or what you did to the vocal or, you know, so it's just, I love collaboration.
If you're mixing his vocal, is there any kind of plugins, any kind of thing that you do? Do you ever add distortion or grit to it? If so, is there like a distortion or a plugin that you love?
It's a little harmonic distortion
Right.
with the actual Avid um, distortion plugin they have. And I'll just add a little bit, not a lot. I don't typically add distortion because his voice already is like, it's very gritty,
Right.
top and heavy. So there's not a lot of room for it unless it's something stylistically I'm doing. Like on Trauma, we purposely added distortion, you know, like a little altar boy, things like that, so that the hook had a real raw, gritty, distorted sound to it on purpose. But if it's not stylistic, I typically try to keep it as clean as possible because his vocal's already naturally pretty gritty.
So when you're tracking through the REQ, the R comp, DSs, etc. Are you keeping those on when you come to mix, or are you just swapping them out for or adding extra plugins?
We do swap, or maybe we even just strip down like some stuff once we get a cleaner mix, and we need to kind of come down on the actual gain, you know, for the vocal. We'll come off of some of that, or just at least turn it down, and then we'll bring in, you know, a slicker EQ like a UAD SSL EQ, or there's a couple more that we use that I can't think of off top, but there's definitely some swapping out that happens. Um, you know, Fab Filter, some of that dynamic on the Pro Q3 is absolutely amazing, where you could just kind of tune in on certain problem areas, and it just does like it's multi-band, but it's like it's very clean, and it doesn't like you were talking about, it doesn't add any issues, you know, especially when you do it really light, not too heavy, no more than like -3 in certain problem areas, and it just let it do its.
Compressor, is there any plug-in compressors you love on vocals when mixing?
I like to keep it simple with those, the R comp and the RVox together. The tone from the RVox, you know, Meek's vocal isn't naturally low end, and I feel like it just gives him
Yeah.
presence at the low end.
It does, doesn't it? I don't know what it is about that. And as somebody, I keep saying that whenever we're doing mixing videos, and I put the Arvox on, and I say it just adds in so much low girth. It's
Yeah.
really good, like you're saying, on a singer or a rapper that doesn't have the low lows. And then
Mhm.
somebody debated me and said, "No, it doesn't." I'm like, "Well, I don't know, because all of us hear it that way."
Yeah, try it yourself.
Yeah, yeah, it's really good. It's
All- Yeah.
great on a girl that maybe doesn't have that lower octave down there, and you can just
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
I've tried swapping all this stuff out and it just takes away from the vibe. And, he notices it immediately. So it's like, it's a fine line.
Do you ever find yourself using any limiting at the very end?
I'm mostly focused on de-essing. I mean, there's such a presence on the high end of his vocal that I try to kill it without, deading the vocal. We've kind of experimented. I have a young engineer that I'm working with now named Mackie that has kind of put me on to like de-essing at the top of the chain, which
Yep.
traditionally isn't, the best method, but I hear what he's saying. He's like, it just adds more, it's like, it just gives it more of an attack and it just kind of catches some of the problems right away.
Right.
Just from, what's coming in. And it does a great job, but de-essing is definitely something I try to focus on, especially with his vocal.
Then I suppose the other geeky and obvious question is vocal effects. Are you finding that you're putting a lot of effects on during tracking, or do you leave it to afterwards, or is it kind of a combo depending on the song?
A good friend of mine, Ben Thomas, I was training him to help me with Meek at one point. He introduced me to some of his effects tracks, like his delay throws and verb throws and things like that. So I have those that I've integrated in my template. It's just a quick way of like when he's like, yeah, delay that out, you just drag that vocal down and it's set where it's like already has like the telephone effect or whatever effect on the delay and really cool stuff that you can have already kind of preset and you fine tune it later. But just to have that efficient flow when he does ask for some ear candy, you have a quick access to it. On the actual vocal itself, I mean, that's typically post because while he's recording, if you're starting to kind of do too much or make it sound a little too muddy or whatever, with like a lot of reverb and things like that, without having the time to dial it in, it throws him off. So,
any particular delays that you're a fan of?
I really love Echo Boy.
Oh yeah,
big fan of Echo Boy. Actually, they brought Echo Farm back.
They did?
Yeah.
Oh wow, I love Echo Farm.
That was our go-to when I first started working with him. We had Echo Farm, and so I just recently got that. So I'm going to start using that a lot.
Echo Farm, let's get it. Is it still line 6? Is it still line 6?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh wow, Echo Farm was so good because as a guitar player, it was like I don't know where it is that pedal, and it was just this, and it had like those sweep delays, that kind of delays that were just so cool.
Really clean,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna integrate that more, but that is back on my radar. H delay is always just tried and true.
Yeah, I love how dumb H delay is. It always sounds good, and then you can shape the EQ with the high and low pass filter and just make it. Do you find with delays and stuff, especially with like fast raps and stuff like that? Because I hear a lot of emphasis you're talking about with de-essing. Because if somebody is doing something super fast, the last thing you want is to hear like aggressive S's. So with the delays, are you finding you're wiping off some of that high end so it doesn't create like a lot of kind of stuff going on?
Yeah, so like there's already kind of a preset EQ, there's some compression and whatever settings on the delay, just as a preset sound, just to have him hear the ear candy, and then if there's any problems, we'll go in after. But it's typically pretty clean. We do avoid some of that issue.
And then any verbs, any kind of reverbs that you like?
I really like Valhalla a lot. Vintage verb, shimmer. I mean, it's just so clean and not a lot of processing. We may use our verb sometimes still, but if I have the access to Valhalla, I'm typically adding Valhalla.
What about Soothe 2? Have you got hip to that?
Yes. It's interesting because it's doing so much, but it's not taking away too much, but you can see it how it's working and you're just like, wow, but I have incorporated Soothe, especially when he's really going in. And it's like the high end part of his vocal, it comes in handy because it definitely attacks that harshness. And again, it just doesn't take away from the quality.
And where are you putting it? At the end of the chain?
Yeah, typically at the end, and focus on more high end, you know, more high end stuff. And there's some settings that I've dialed in, but I keep playing with it because I feel like it's such a dynamic plugin. You know what I mean? So it's really cool to kind of tinker with.
So you're doing various stages of de-essing and maybe soothe. Do you find after you've tamed it all that you then actually might add a high-end EQ at the very end? Just because now it's all tamed, you can kind of brighten everything again, but it's now not killing you with these high frequencies jumping out.
There's some EQ we do where we're adding back in like 12K, between 5 and 6, just a little bit. Things that have gotten tamed, like you said, it works really well. And then also just having like a master EQ, like an overall sweep of the top end and a little bit on the low as well.
So there's certain plugins that you're going to put on the vocal. It's on the actual vocal track, and then you have, does that bus to an auxiliary? So it goes then through, and then maybe there's another set of compression and EQ on that.
Literally, there's audio tracks that are all fed to the same vocal bus.
I see.
Yeah, so that's the one I was telling you where it's like, you know, audio track or the Renaissance EQ, and then, you know, the compression and things like that. Now, when I get surgical, I'll put that on the actual audio track, the fab filter.
Then, of course, all the effects are on separate auxiliaries. Presumably, they're triggered from the master auxiliary, or are you sending them from individual vocals?
I actually send those throw tracks out 1 and 2 and then just have them, you know, it just works. And once we get into mixing, if we have to tame them a little more or do any more effect, we may send those to their own bus for compression and things like that.
Are they being sent from the master auxiliary that all the other vocals are coming to, or are they being sent from individual vocals to the, you know, to the effects?
Yeah, so the effects throws, it's literally just, you know, I'll just drag a piece of the audio down and it'll just send out.
Ah, I see. Okay. That's, yeah, rather than like automating sends from individuals. I see. Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
Right. The only thing that's getting more effects on the actual audio track itself is ad libs and backgrounds will, you know, it's got its own EQ and things like that. I'll do like auto pan just so that it's not, you know, competing with the main vocal. And we typically at the end of the process, once we're getting into mixing, we'll put it on its own bus, which is basically just a duplicate of the lead where we can do, you know, our own, just basically compress that differently. Obviously, it's going to be different. So
it sounds like to me, so much of the vocal production is sort of done. So when the mixer's getting it, yes, they may do other, you know, they may change the compression and the EQ, but you've done so much of the production, because if he's singing and doing a lead down here and then a double that comes in and out and then stuff that's panning and stuff like, those are very, very well thought out, very, you know, strategic. And the last thing you're going to do as a mixer is go, no, I don't want to do any of that. I'm going to.
Yeah. Jason spoke about it on the panel. He's like, you know, the vocal is basically where it needs to be. You know, of course he does his thing, but the vocal is not the issue. It's always about the production, just amplifying the production, maybe just adding some of the effects and things like that, if he has any ideas on that. But the vocal itself is pretty locked in. Yeah. And the arrangement.
That's why Jason's such a big fan of yours.
Yeah, we've done some big records together. You know, he got the call on some of the bigger records, so he's always come through. You know, we did Going Bad together with Drake, which is over 5 times platinum, and then that Dangerous record he mentioned on the panel is one of my favorite mixes. It's just so clean and just warm and full, and it sounds amazing. And it's a great reference track.
He's got great ears. He's got really great ears. He's got a very sophisticated tastes as well. When you know you've talked to him many times, he likes music with a capital M, like every genre, everything. And I think that's one of the things that we always talk about. You know, doesn't matter what genre you're in, listen to everybody else's genre because you're going to learn so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's
important.
fantastic. Anthony, thanks ever so much. This has been amazing.
Yeah, man, it's been great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Big fan of you guys' show and the platform. Thanks for all the tips and tricks over the years. It's really helped my process.
It's very humbling for you to say that. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to put a link down below, of course, to Anthony's discography, and website will be down below. Any comments and questions, please leave them down there. And thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, everybody. Goodbye.